Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Please note, this episode contains some explicit language. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits, the man who inside feels like C-3PO and outside looks like Emperor Palpatine. And that should be a clue as to what we're going to be looking at today. Frankly, you will have had to have been living under a stone not to have spotted the hype surrounding the new Star Wars film, The Force Awakens. Of course, it's a big event in cinematic history, and everyone's very, very excited about it. Well, I always think when there's a bandwagon rolling by, it's probably worthwhile jumping on it. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this episode of Musical Talk. You may remember for Doctor Who's 50th anniversary in November 2013, we looked at Doctor Who related musicals. So we're going to be doing exactly the same thing again today for Star Wars. Yes, this episode is about Star Wars musicals. But do you know what? It turns out there's quite a lot. When I was researching this episode, I discovered that Star Wars related musicals fall into three particular areas. They are as follows: musical adaptations of the first Star Wars film, that is A New Hope, the original one from the 1970s, the one that got the canon started, if you like. And I found three separate full-length adaptations of that film as musicals, all of which can be found on YouTube, and all of which take a very different approach to musicalising that story. And I hope that we can look at those on another occasion in another episode of Musical Talk. Then the second category of associated musicals related to Star Wars are those which are parodies, which take the mick in some way. And I must say you can see an absolute step change in the number of those being created since the Disney Corporation took over the Star Wars franchise. There are literally hundreds of parodic Star Wars spoofs that you can find online. Some are just 2 minutes long, some are 20 minutes long. I found one which is a 2-hour staged comic adaptation of the first of the prequel films, called, rather hilariously, Annie, A-N-I, which of course is the shortened version of the name of Darth Vader as a boy, Anakin. But it's very safely trading on Charles Strauss's ideas there, I think, with the musical version of Orphan Annie. And so I hope that we can look at those in another episode as well, because there's plenty of meat on that bone. But the third category of musicals, and the one that we're going to be concentrating on today, is a slightly difficult one. It's what might be called in-universe musicals relating to Star Wars. That is to say, Star Wars spin-offs which are considered to be, however loosely or tenuously, within the Star Wars universe, i.e. they happened in the Star Wars worlds. And by that I mean spin-offs or dramas or some kind of production where the characters, and indeed the actors from the Star Wars films, turn up as those characters, and there is some kind of musical element involved. Now, what's interesting is, in each case, everything is diegetic. There are two principal examples, and every time a song comes up, it is because the characters in those productions are looking at a song or performing a song because that's what is happening in the narrative, not just because it's an outspringing of their emotional state. Now, I'm sure if you know anything about Star Wars, you'll probably be able to guess at least one of these shows, but I'm going to tell you now what they are. The two in-universe musicals that we're going to be discussing today here on Musical Talk are the 1980 episode of The Muppet Show, which featured Chewbacca, Luke Skywalker, C-3PO and R2-D2, and confusingly also Mark Hamill as Mark Hamill, claiming to be the cousin of Luke Skywalker. And the reason that counts is because the Star Wars characters in that believe they are the Star Wars characters and that they have beamed into a vaudeville theatre, the Muppet Theatre, and that the songs are going on around them. It's loose, I grant you. However, there are learned articles online where people are trying to argue that that is part of the Star Wars canon. Well, that's entirely up to you if you want to believe that. It's entirely up to you if you don't. However, for the purposes of today, that's exactly how we're going to interpret it. And the second one, of course, is the legendary, nay notorious, Star Wars Holiday Special from 1978. You may or may not know about this, but after the first film came out, but well before the second film had been released, on American television, on the 17th of November 1978, which is a week before the Thanksgiving celebration in America, in prime time evening viewing between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m, the Star Wars Holiday Special was aired for the very first, and indeed, I believe, for the very last time. It was directed by a man called Steve Binder, who had a long track record in television specials and spectaculars, and in his career would work with Petula Clark, Elvis Presley, Patti LaBelle, Barry Manilow and Liza Minnelli, to name just a few. And if it's remembered at all, the Star Wars Holiday Special is remembered because in the middle there's a 10-minute cartoon sequence which introduces the character of the bounty hunter Boba Fett, who turns up in several of the films. But its principal selling point was that it featured Star Wars cast and characters. And so on the poster for it, and this is the order of the billing, you have Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Anthony Daniels, Peter Mayhew, and of course James Earl Jones providing the voice of Darth Vader. And of course Kenny Baker, who played R2-D2, was not listed on the poster, sadly. But it does go on to list the special stars, the special guest stars, who have also been invited to be in the show. Bea Arthur, who of course was a famous Broadway star. She appeared in many shows, including Mame with Angela Lansbury. There was Art Carney, a singer called Diane Carroll, a 1970s pop group called The Jefferson Starship, and an actor called Harvey Korman, who's known from a couple of the Mel Brooks films, Blazing Saddles and High Anxiety. But the reason we're including this television programme today is because, once again, those actors were playing their Star Wars parts and appear in the show to help drive along the narrative, which is focused mostly on Chewbacca's family. Once again, the songs that we hear are all diegetic, i.e. they are part of the narrative. People turn on their television to watch a song, or people choose to perform a song because they are a performer of songs. It's that kind of thing. And like The Muppet Show, it's really a musical only in the sense that it's a variety show. Were these two in-universe musicals successful? Well, I imagine you can probably guess the answer even before we start the main part of the episode today. And indeed, the Star Wars Holiday Special has an infamous reputation for being diabolical. Was it diabolical, or was it enjoyable? Well, I invited old friend of this programme, Tim Saywood, and Star Wars enthusiast Darren Deeks to join me to watch those two programmes and then to discuss them here on Musical Talk. And just to get us into the mood, and by way of having something very different, we watched the 3 Robot Chicken episodes dedicated to taking the Mickey out of the Star Wars films. We watched them first, and then we went into The Muppet Show with Mark Hamill and the Star Wars Holiday Special. Let's find out what we thought. And to enjoy this episode more, you might find it useful to strap yourself into the same chair that was used by Itchy, who's the grandpa figure in the Wookiee family, and which can only really be described as an orgasmatron. Good luck. Musical Talk. Well, welcome to Musical Talk, and today I'm joined in the studio by old favourite
Tim.
That's Tim Saywood, and he is a favourite, I assure you.
And new favourite, Darren.
That's Darren Deeks. And you've been on the programme before talking about Wicked.
I have.
But today we're going to be talking about, well, musical connected versions of the big film franchise, which is all over the place at the moment, which is the latest Star Wars film.
Absolutely. It has been all over the place for about 40 years, probably.
Yes, it has.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there is if you excuse the pun, a new hope around Episode 7 because the prequels were mixed.
Mixed. Not quite as good as the originals.
I also don't forgive you the pun, frankly.
No.
So, but what we were trying to do, we looked at parodies and we looked at direct versions of musicalizations of the films. But today we're going to be looking at principally 2 things, although there's a third thing which is going to take us into that, which are sort of musicalized versions of the characters within the Star Wars universe, which are part, or at least purport to be
Basically,
part of that Star Wars universe.
We've looked at some things where, like, some of the original actors sang.
Yeah,
that's sort of what we've done.
That's a nicer way of putting it.
And later on, we watched a parody version. So, a parody version first, we saw Robot Chicken, which is a well-known series with Seth Green, I think, originated.
Yes.
from the States, inevitably.
So much of a Star Wars world is.
Well, exactly. And it's just a series of very, very quick fire sketches, and most of them aren't musical at all. They just sort of generally satirise the world of Star Wars.
They are. There's a couple of musical things, and of course they also use some of the characters who are musical characters from the series. So Max Rebo, Cy Snootles, and the Cantina Band get featured with very occasional uses of the music.
The Cantina Band, first of all, they transmute it into the idea that they were pitching an ad campaign for Admiral Akbar,
using the very famous music that everyone knows.
Akbar's fish sticks from the sea,
That's the one.
oh so tender and flaky.
That piece of music will come up again in our discussions, I rather think.
Well, that's pretty
Yes.
much, along with the theme tune and the Imperial March. Those are that's the third piece of Star Wars music that
Yes.
everybody knows. Really,
You do have, of course, there's also Max Rebo advertising his new album, which is all about the fact that he isn't an elephant.
no, that's true.
Which is hilarious if you know that Max Rebo looked like an elephant.
A blue elephant at that.
A blue
Exactly.
elephant, yes.
It's funnier on the screen, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
However, there is one sketch in the 3 Robot Chicken episodes, which are concentrating on the Star Wars world, which really picks up the idea of a Star Wars musical.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
This is the Empire on Ice, or I don't know what it's actually called, but
Well, I think it is called Empire on Ice. They say that about 5 times.
Here
Empire on
we are,
Ice.
the Empire on Ice.
That's it.
Yes, that's right.
So that's Empire on Ice then.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what it seems to make fun of is the idea of people will do amateur versions of Star Wars musicals, and we'll be talking about those, I think, in another episode one day. But some of the tropes that you do see, and you can see these on YouTube, are featured on here. I don't think that's actually what it was planning to do, but it does have
Well, it's
to
the same
do that.
concept as like the Streetcar, the musical, and The Simpsons. It's just like how terrible a musical or musical entertainment you would make out of Star Wars would make.
Actually, it was making the point of how terrible musicals are, I think.
Well, it kind of is really, yeah.
You may be on the wrong podcast.
And in particular those Ice Holiday specials. So it's just like the very heightened emotions. It's interesting actually because Star Wars is kind of fairly ridiculous in many ways itself. Well, it is. I mean,
Take
it's
that
got
back.
like huge operatic scenes and terrible dialogue sometimes, and
It's melodramatic.
amazing effects and all of that stuff. But it is melodramatic, and so it sort of crashes that together with the even more heightened world of singing along while you skate.
I think it's also worth saying about the Star Wars films. We were talking about this on the way over. There are very few scenes that have no music, and so it's a very
Very mucusy series of films, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
And it's also
George
very,
Lucas is there.
Forgive them, Lord, they know snot what they're talking about.
It's very musicalized, and there's very little that doesn't have that amazing score behind it.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Very phlegmatically put.
Yes, and in fact, you could. Thank you. And you could watch it without the dialogue. And in fact, some people would say that's preferable, and get exactly what's happening emotion-wise through the music, the last scenes, the mystic stuff with Yoda.
Star Wars and musicals belong to the era, that sort of 20s, 30s era of like pure adventure, pure story, pure, those sorts of things. So they're both. And so Star Wars certainly is a throwback to the sort of cowboys and Indians world, isn't it? And,
Deliberately, yeah.
But the effects just were, a squillion times better. So Robot Chicken, that was great.
Robot Chicken is great. Because the sketches are so short that there'll be another one along in a minute if you're not enjoying that one.
And by contrast,
Well,
Yeah.
what was useful about that was because one of the sketches was talking about a Star Wars musical.
yeah,
We then watched 2 further things which are unusual in the sense that they are featuring characters from the Star Wars universe
yep,
in a non-knowing way. I.e. the characters believe they are those characters
Kind of, yeah.
in the environment they are. The first is a 1980s episode of The Muppet Show.
yes,
Featuring
1980,
Mark,
I think.
It is
Hamill.
Mark Hamill and the character of C-3PO and R2-D2.
That's true, there and there. Yeah.
And then we move on to the famous, legendary, and I think we can now add notorious Star Wars holiday special.
Holiday special.
And can I just say that the Muppet episode also features Chewbacca, who carries, if that's the right term,
Labours beneath.
carries it, takes it away, and quietly shoots it in the woods. The Star Wars holiday special.
So we're going to talk first about the Muppet Show episode, and then we're going to be talking about the holiday special. And there is a reason for that. First-
Therapy.
Yes. Well, I think we can honestly say that our evening of watching these things got worse in terms of quality. And there is a lot to be said about the holiday special. And it is the nearest thing there is to an official musical in the world of Star Wars.
Yeah, kind of.
But it is very much in the world of variety, I think is the politest way of putting it.
Yeah.
And so The Muppet Show is a very good precursor to that, because that's a deliberate variety
they
show.
both come from a time when the brand of Star Wars wasn't well enough established. That
it was only the one film.
That's right, that it wasn't really... It was considered to be part of the entertainment galaxy, as it were. And after the second film and the third film, really, they'd sort of achieved a dignity as a product that sort of transcended such cheap and tacky...
Although it didn't stop the 2 Ewoks films.
Well, no.
And the spin-off cartoon.
That's true.
Dignity must never get in the way of making money.
But it's true, I think you're right, that Star Wars sort of became... Iconic, and therefore...
Sky-conic.
More heavily... No. I think you're pronouncing that wrong. No, but more heavily licensed. People be much more careful with how it's being used.
Yeah, exactly. So, so these were some of those carefree and cautious days. In The Muppet Show, you get Mark Hamill appearing, as you say, as his character Luke Skywalker.
But also as himself, the song and dance man. Yes, Mark Hamill, the cousin of Luke Skywalker, is how he's actually put.
He's sort of, when he's not dressed in his sort of smart, very tight trousers, his khaki trousers that he had that's from the first film, isn't it?
No, the costume he's wearing is actually from The Empire Strikes Back, which hadn't yet been released, so it is anachronistic in case fans.
Yeah,
but there is a running joke about the costume being smart, and almost every character he bumps into, incidentally, either in a sketch or beyond, says, "Who's your tailor?"
Who's your tailor? It's very nice. But also, there's him in a 70s style tank top, looking like a member of the Osmonds.
With that haircut,
with that exact haircut, and he doesn't do long-haired lover from Liverpool, but
you hoped, didn't you, for a while?
I kind of hoped that he would do that. But
he was like his alter ego, and who knows, that could be the real Mark Hamill. He's a song and dance man with a cheesy grin.
Well,
yes.
In fairness,
oddly that he holds it back in this then.
But the joke is, isn't it, that he comes on and says, "I tell you what, I will do a song and dance thing."
Yeah.
And then he tries to do various, he does comedy and dance and sings.
He does fairly good impersonations of Kermit and
he
Fozzie.
does really good impressions, but they keep saying to him, "No, you're not good enough." And then he comes on at the end and does it anyway.
He probably could do Yoda, and they could have saved on a fee if they just got him to double up.
That's true.
In Empire Strikes Back.
But when you look back, obviously everyone knows the connection to the Muppet Show and the Muppets as a concept with the Star Wars films. It's ongoing.
I'm sure there'll be another tie-in soon.
I'm sure there shall, but particularly as there's a new Muppet series appearing in America, I believe, at the moment. But
I think it's on the UK as well.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
But the point is, I think, that actually, when you look back, as you say, unfettered by any other films, it's the most natural thing in the world to say, well, why don't we connect with our Muppet friends, and Frank Oz famously, and do this show?
Yeah.
So, as a show, did you enjoy it?
No.
And why is that?
Because I loved both Star Wars and the Muppets when I was a kid. But it turns out that if you put two things you love together, it's not always going to be good. And I think the Muppets, there wasn't enough. I mean, basically, there wasn't enough to do with it. There were 4 characters who were just mugging, really.
Yeah. The problem is, it's been the age-old problem of how light entertainment treats science fiction, and all right, Star Wars isn't science fiction; it's space opera, so it's
but it's dressed as science fiction.
And you get things when that happens, like the Arlene Phillips choreographed "I Lost My Heart to a Starship Trooper." I mean, basically, space opera, which is quite campy to begin with, gets taken to an extreme. And this is what the Robot Chicken thing satirises. Gets taken to a really extreme, parodic level by people who haven't the faintest notion about the sort of space part of it, but know about the opera part of it.
It's shiny silver costumes.
That's kind of it. It's all done in
quite often figure hugging.
It's all done in tinfoil on a flying saucer, and it's just sort of it's all very Ed Wood. And
yet, ironically, in the world of musical theatre, that has now actually come into the end of rock opera anyway, isn't it? Because things like Captain Jack and the Space Vixens.
Well, Rocky Horror Show.
Yeah,
I mean, of course,
it's a
parody of. It's a parody of.
I think it's about knowingness, and I think that you're right that sort of space opera is overblown, but Star Wars particularly is treated very seriously by its fans,
and internally it's played very straight. Because that's what makes it work.
That's right. And whereas, so when it appears on the Muppets, and of course it's for a child-only audience, where Star Wars had mass family appeal. So then they have to take out the things that
it's all about sending it up.
Yeah, and I think plus I think it's a generational thing as well, and that light entertainment is much more knowing now, and the Muppets.
It's a throwback.
Yeah.
It is actually a throwback to old variety theatres. In fact, it's set, isn't it, in a variety theatre? So
it is.
Even in 1980, it felt like something from 1955.
Yeah.
It was right. It was the kids' version of London, the Palladium.
Yes, if you like.
Palladium.
I mean, let's talk briefly about the musical elements of this episode of the Muppet Show.
There's a John Denver style song by Scooter, but we can just set that aside at the moment because it's got nothing to do at all with
well, that was the highlight of the show.
Yes, exactly.
Well, there were various songs which actually had nothing to do with the thematic element of having the Star Wars characters in there, even though they are identified as the guests of the show. The first thing is a completely guest-free sequence about Rama-Langa Ding Dong, isn't it, Mike?
Yes.
It's that 1960s pop song.
Featuring rams and lambs.
Yes.
Filler material,
And ding
I believe
dong.
is the technical expression for that, yeah.
Then later on, we do have a non-musical piece, which is the Pigs in Space sequence, which actually I think is the most successful of the sequences, because if you like, you've got a Star Trek spoof joining a send-up of a Star Wars situation.
Plus Miss Piggy, which is always good.
Well, actually, funny enough, the thing I learned from it was that the character of Miss Piggy is the most sophisticated character in the show anyway, and because she's more than one joke, isn't she?
Yes, and that is where I think that's because the Muppets over time. I know we're getting off the point, but the Muppets has changed because it's become more knowing, and that's through the character of Miss Piggy, who is much more worldly than the other characters, and she gets the laughs for that reason. I think.
Waka waka. Yep.
That's Fozzie Bear.
I know.
Oh.
Well, put some clothes on, Fozzie.
Just punctuating your observation.
And then at the end, there's a part 2 of the Pigs in Space where they actually have a soft landing on the planet, which is anything
so then finally we get to the crossover, and
it is a crossover.
That takes the form of them singing, first of all...
You Are My Lucky Star.
You Are My Lucky Star.
From the film Singing in the Rain.
The classic science fiction number. And
well, it has the word star in it.
And can I point out as well...
But that's exactly that thing about like the Island Phillips thing. It's like musical theatre people, they look at like science fiction and think, what can we do that's sort of relevant to this?
It's got a star in the
title. You're my lucky star.
You Are My Lucky Star was also used in Alien, so there's another sci-fi link for you. It's the song...
Yes, we're in time, aren't we? Because it's 1979.
Yes, and it's the song that Ripley sort of sings to herself very nervously, sort of to give up her courage while she's ready to tackle the alien in the final battle in the pod.
I wonder why they never did a Muppets Alien crossover. That would have been good. It could have had an
Kermit bursting out of John's stomach.
Robin.
Get back in, Brug! But actually, funny enough, that self-same song, You Are My Lucky Star, was very nearly the theme tune right up until the last minute of
Star Wars.
The Sky at Night, the long-standing British television program about astronomy. It was only at the last minute they decided to go to the very stentorian piece they now still use.
And I've no doubt that Patrick Moore also guested in the Muppet Show, so there we are, full circle.
I'm not sure he did, but
well, who knows?
He did the goodies.
Who cares?
What did it was Lucky Star and then didn't go into something else?
Yes, When You Wish Upon a Star.
Oh,
which is, and then there was this very odd moment where the whole thing segues into actually the opening sequence of any Disney film.
Ironically enough.
Yes.
Which is, and of course now we all know both the Muppets and the Star Wars franchise are owned by Disney. So in a way...
Everything's owned by Disney.
The Disney castle loomed up behind them
with fireworks.
With foreshadowing.
Yeah, with When You Wish Upon a Star being sung.
That's right.
R2-D2 singing along and everything.
But I must agree, I think, with Aaron, that I don't think it was a truly successful half hour of comedy.
No.
Or variety, for that matter.
Well, you know, I mean, the Muppet Show was always hit and miss. It was a sort of produced week in, week out programme.
Yeah, it's a sketch show.
But it's a rare glimpse then of Mark Hamill, a pre-Scar Mark Hamill, in his Empire Strikes Back costume then.
Yes.
So there we are. For that rarity value alone, I consider it the jewel of any collection. And anybody who doesn't own it is not a Star Wars completist and should go out and shoot themselves as soon as they become aware of it.
Please note this is not the official editorial policy of Musical Talk.
I don't know if it's considered to be canon or not. I personally don't include any of the prequels as canon.
And you don't include the Muppet Show as canon?
That's my personal feeling about the prequels. I might include the Muppets as canon because I like the idea that Luke actually did sing You Are My Lucky Star.
I like that too.
It must be said, however, that I was researching this morning, and for the most part, it is not, this will come as a surprise, considered to be canon, but there has been at least one fairly serious treatise that tries to incorporate that episode into the official canon. So there are attempts.
When you say treatise, do you mean an actual PhD thesis?
I believe
someone
so.
was actually paid to write at an actual university?
Whether they're paid to write, I wouldn't like to say.
Why are you so sniffy about that?
No, it's fine. My tax is at work. That's fine.
Bearing in mind, Klingon is now studied in various universities.
Again.
As an artificial language.
Yes.
There is an intellectual position behind it.
Yeah, anyway.
But so it isn't canon, but there are at least one or two attempts that it be. Now, we said it wasn't tremendously successful as a half hour, which I think allows us to segue rather splendidly into what I think must have been a 2-hour television special.
Yes. With ads. Sponsored by General Motors.
Of the Star Wars holiday special?
Yes. Now, it wouldn't be true to say that that's not successful as a half an hour of entertainment.
I think it
For
would.
the reasons you've just said.
It's the first time I've seen it, so
as it was for me.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask, before we go on to any review or discussion of it then, what were you expecting from the Star Wars Holiday Review? Because it does have a reputation for not being brilliant.
No.
But we all know that it's got songs in it. So that's why we watched it. We wanted to watch it as the nearest example of a Star Wars musical in canon.
That's right.
What were you expecting, and then what did you get? And I want to ask that question of all three of us. So.
Okay, well, one thing I was expecting that we didn't get, unfortunately, was the cartoon, which is the main reason I watched it, where Boba Fett is introduced, because in the version that we watched, it was cut for copyright reasons. But luckily, that meant shearing some time off of the whole thing, which was a benefit. I think I was probably expecting... I was expecting high camp, really. I knew it was bad. I knew it featured songs. Ergo, I assumed it'd be quite camp. And what I found was it was very lumpy.
I believe that's a hilarious reference.
That's another Star Wars pun for you all. I'm not playing back on this, am I?
For those who haven't seen it, I'd say low camp, perhaps more than high camp.
Was that what you were expecting?
For those, what I was, I think I had read about it before, so obviously I knew that it was considered an atrocity of one of the worst of the 20th century.
It was indeed a Thanksgiving turkey.
Yeah, and that everybody who was involved in it was terribly embarrassed by it, and that Lucas had sort of rejected it initially, although again recanonised later on. And what it consists of is that. Bizarre reason, I would say best known to the creators, but I suspect not. They focus on Chewbacca's family, which means that the initial opening scene that you get is just a series of three actors grunting at each other
in hairy costumes,
in a way that makes it look like a sort of weird reversal of Harry and the Hendersons, so that you've got like the main family as these hairy.
Can I just say though that when A New Hope was filmed, Peter Mayhew playing Chewbacca didn't make those noises; he delivered lines. So I can only imagine that was full of them sort of saying, "Take the bins out and come over here and do the washing up," because that's really what happened.
Just overdubbed later on.
The first 5 minutes or so, it basically involves a Wilfrid Bramble type.
Old man
Wookiee. Yeah. Then you've got
type.
Lumpy, who's not
Chewie's, a space princess.
No, unfortunately not. Chewie's son and Marla. I think
Marla,
who's the mother.
Wouldn't simply die without Marla.
And she spends most of her time in the kitchen, as women in the 70s on American television did. Mm-hmm. Lumpy annoys his granddad. I mean, it's exciting as that, really.
It is a real-time domestic situation with nothing happening. It's what you remember from your own childhood about being born in the afternoon.
They obviously figured this is a Thanksgiving special, therefore it has to focus around family, and then they just picked that particular I suppose it sort of makes more sense than giving Han Solo a terribly... saddling him with a terrible
with customs
family.
Very much like our own, and coffee tables very much like our own.
Yes, and
sideboards.
Furniture. Particularly those sort of those nice sort of bookshelves, where they had their knickknacks on and
sliding cabinet.
You could see through to the other side. That was a very 70s thing.
Yeah.
Well, just to let you know because I also hadn't seen it before, and I had sort of been looking forward to it because I agree with you, Darren. I thought it was going to be funny in spite of itself. I thought what was going to happen was there was going to be a very weak narrative. I was right there. I thought there was going to be a number of songs and entertainments throughout, more than we got. I was sort of right because there are a number of them, but what I didn't expect them to be was so poor even in their own right as performances. I expected them to be completely inappropriately shoehorned in, but to be haps. I'm not a great fan of rock music, but look, here's a rock group. They can sing a song and they'll at least do that well because that's what they do when they're not appearing on this kind of thing. But none of that worked. So that's what I was expecting, was very disappointed not to get. Shall we very, very briefly go through the narrative drive of this? Because there is a story.
In essence, the family are waiting for Chewbacca's return. And
we should say, by the way, it's Happy Life Day, everybody. This is for Life Day, which is I
felt I was doing life watching it.
A uniquely Wookiee celebration that they celebrate on Kashyyyk, although in this it's known as Kazook. Because they can't pronounce it properly, and Chewie is trying to get home for Life Day. He's never missed a Life Day, and Han Solo, Harrison Ford, doing remarkably well. I mean, because you can write this shit, but you sure can't say it. And and I don't know how he managed, but he was by far the best performer. He was trying to make sure he got Chewie home. However,
in the meantime,
because they're rebels, the Empire is crawling all over Kazook and is trying to stop them arriving. And
put a curfew on the planet,
and on other planets.
Tatooine,
because even B. Arthur is affected by this.
Even the goddess B. Arthur.
I should add that she is in this. It's not that she is also affected despite not appearing.
Probably doesn't matter.
So you're right. So there is a certain amount of jeopardy, very low level jeopardy.
So they're raided by the stormtroopers, and who search the house for a good sort of 40 minutes of the special, during which they find nothing until it's pointed out to them by the young...
They do stop to watch a performance by the Jefferson Starship.
Jefferson Starship, Jefferson Airplane, obviously, redressed for the purpose.
Group at the time, yes.
Yes. So they stop for that. Then they go and smash up the little kid's room. And then they...
But nothing else in the house?
No, nothing else in the house.
Just the kids' room?
Just the kids' room. And they don't look behind the cupboard that has the secret communication device.
No, they don't think of that. And in the meantime, Chewbacca's father watches a
mucky video.
Frankly, erotic video of Diane Carroll, if I'm saying that right, as a sort of just fantasy figure who appears. And they also sort of watch Wookiee television basically a couple of times. So they watch holographic representation of basically a circus act. They watch the cartoons, or and then what's the other thing that they
it's
sort
not
of
very
program.
The cooking.
As I say, it's not very Wookiee television. There are very few. There's not much representation. They're underrepresented.
I think basically what we're seeing here is a metaphor for race in America.
Yeah,
basically
that's how I saw it.
I think it's a very serious attempt to get underneath those issues.
It was so far underneath.
So far underneath
completely missed them
that nobody noticed.
It was like British television before they showed Desmond's on Channel 4.
That's right.
Let us talk then about the musical and speech marks entertainment.
Let's.
Well, no, the very first one is Lumpy the child.
Yes.
Yep.
Excellently named. Is bored, has been harassing his grandfather and mother. And so goes on to basically a video recorder of some variety, I think, although it's a sort of 3D one on a table.
Yeah.
Puts in his cassette, which appears to be the method by which a television is.
Well, it was
they're all hipsters.
It was a galaxy a long way away, and it was a long time ago. Hence they were using analog technology at that time.
And what we get is essentially what looks to me like a circus. It's gymnasts.
It was indeed a circus.
There were lots and lots of people in lycra doing gymnastics, and they were doing it in a circle, so it looked like a big top. And it seemed to go on for a very, very long time.
Yes.
The next sequence, if you like, which was supposed to be a comedy sequence, I think, is the cooking sequence.
Yes.
Where there was a man dressed as a woman
who was also blacked up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, moved.
Really?
I think it was moved up. Actually,
moved up.
End.
I'm
so
sorry.
I think she was alien rather than making a very poor design choice. With 4 arms for comedy effect for the purposes of stirring the food.
The cooking,
Moved up. I think that's very offensive to aliens.
Yeah.
Pretty offensive to Earthlings.
It was quite hard for Marla to keep up as well, I thought.
Yes, that's true. It was an attempt at comedy.
And then, as you say, we have Grandfather's mucky moment, which he basically straps himself into a device. So there's a touch of 50 Shades going on.
Well, their friend Art, what was his
Carney.
name? Art Carney, who playing I forget the name of the character.
He's basically a wide boy who's working for the rebels, isn't he?
Yeah, he's he runs the local shop, as it were, the local technology shop, and he gets raided. And I mean, he's 2 actors really, one of 2 actors who really put some effort in here.
Try to overcome their material.
He tries to play the threat as if it's a threat, and Harrison Ford tries to play the ludicrous scenario as if it's an actual scenario.
But so he gets strapped into his orgasmatron, essentially.
By Art Carney, yes.
Another cassette is placed in the slot, and then for about what seems like 5 minutes, you do have essentially a green kaleidoscope, which is a kind of fisheye lens and lots of lighting.
Oh, that thing, yeah.
And then, if I remember rightly, there were 2 women dressed all in white, swanning up and down, which looked all the world like 2 remaining sperm on a petri dish.
Like a Matthew Bourne show.
And then eventually more turn up and they coalesce into the singer.
You have this has burned itself on your memory, hasn't it? I'd already forgotten that part.
Therapy starts tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then she talks dirty to him, essentially.
She talks dirty.
Bearing in mind it is a very family-orientated, completely...
Yes, you see him sort of rewinding on the bit where she says, "I find you very attractive."
You're adorable.
You're adorable.
Yeah, there was...
And isn't there a line saying, I know what you're thinking, or something like that? I mean, it's very...
Well, we immediately got the impression that
it's
it was a
70s.
dirty video.
Yeah.
And then she sings an overlaid video. So she sings this rather tepid song, it has to be said. But there's a version of her in pink, and there's a version of her in beige, standing behind, and it's not awfully well.
She was a vision in beige, wasn't she?
It's sort of it's very much in the sub Donna Summer, but not very but low energy sort of thing.
More breathy, I thought.
Yeah, I suppose it was supposed to follow on from like I don't know, Je t'aime or something like that. I don't know.
Or Love to Love You, Baby.
Oh, that's it. That's what it's like.
But without any sort of excitement or.
It had no oomph.
It had no oomph.
And it didn't have soul either. So
No.
I'm not quite sure what it was doing there.
Apart
Really.
from that, it was awesome.
But the very difficult point about it is that the old man Steptoe, as we christened Itchy, the grandfather,
Yeah.
Unfortunately on his mask, his jaw sort of rides up above his top.
Yeah, he has
lip.
an underbite. Yeah.
Yeah, so it looks like he's sort of gurning with pleasure.
He looks like
this.
old man Steptoe, basically.
He does, yeah.
That's who he looks like.
It was disturbing. We all looked at each other at that moment because it was
Well,
better
the
than watching the screen.
Yeah. So that's one number, and then I think we don't get another number for quite some time until the climactic moment.
No,
the
you-
Jefferson Starship.
You get them,
Jefferson Starship.
and they're great for distracting the Empire, because the Empire loves.
Oddly, in the midst
prog
of the
rock.
search, they just
Prog rock?
stop.
Prog rock.
Prog rock, and they just in the midst of the search, they just stop to watch the vid screen for a bit, as you do in a framing device. And
You see his finger occasionally tapping with.
oh, do you? With
I
sheer
assume it's
delight.
pleasure,
I
yeah.
actually was not really paying attention at that moment.
What was rather disturbing to many of us, however, is that they were using 70s early technology, weren't they, for special effects? And so they'd been coated in paint, one or two items, either props or clothing, which gave them a kind of pink ultraviolet glow.
It may even
which
have
sort
been.
of-
It may have been front axial projection.
Is that what you think it was?
Well, for the fans of Doctor Who, of course, you know that there are two key effects: chroma key, which was used extensively in
CSO.
this, and front axial projection. And I think this may have been an example of the latter.
It certainly made Doctor Who like a no expense spared production.
Ha-
But
yeah.
the point was, they were wearing this kind of sort of pink light effect. And the lead singer was singing in a very long tubular microphone, which was painted bright pink and looked all the world a little phallic to me.
And well, even before you saw what colour it was painted,
It was the shadow scene, wasn't there?
The shadow scene. It looked like there was something going on there.
It looked as though he was singing his prog rock into an erection. Let's be honest. So
It was like Marla's Mucky video, really.
Everything that was wrong with the 70s, just in one fairly substantial package, if I may say so.
But then you're quite right. The next musical number is the B. Arthur number. We take for no obvious reason a trip to Tatooine and the bar. Presumably, is it Mos Eisley?
It's the Mos Eisley Space
Mos Eisley
Cantina,
Space
and you've
Cantina.
got the band there.
playing their one song.
Yes.
Figuring, sorry, I must say they're called Figuring Dan and the Modal Nodes.
And we're impressed that you know that.
Which is annoying because I don't think the song is modal.
And that's where musical talk trumps Star Wars.
I might be wrong about that. I'll have to go and play on the white keys of the piano.
It's a weird scene because it starts with what looks like the raw footage and the rushes from the cantina scene.
It's outtakes without special effects. Isn't
Yeah.
it?
And then of course for the actual scenes you then just have fewer characters. Although there are some sort of favourites such as and they're all there. And there's a guy. He goes back to the bar. By the way, all the time this is happening, the Empire people are watching this protracted, painful love scene for no reason at all.
Yes, the bar love scene.
And therefore, so are we. And he drinks by pouring liquid into the top of his head, although he has a mouth and he talks. So who knows what he uses that for? B. Arthur, hopefully, we'll
Scotch
find
eggs.
out eventually.
Well, she decided she didn't want to find out.
She
didn't
decided she didn't want to find out. So there's a very good gag that this guy with the hole in his head also has 6 fingers. So he's probably very popular with the ladies. And he comes back because he remembers B. Arthur. Sorry, I'm laughing just because of the idea that he comes back to see B. Arthur in a canteen. I don't know what her character's name is. But anyway,
B. Arthur, I should think.
he spells out the 6 words she said, which was "Come back soon, I'll be waiting."
But he holds up his hand with 6 fingers on it.
He does.
That's for joke.
That's the joke.
But there's also a touch of pathos in there, isn't it? It's the nearest thing to a genuine emotional moment in the whole thing.
Because
actually.
he later hears her say it to another character.
Any customer.
And he appears crestfallen. What I would have liked was him to sort of his head to go down and all the liquid to pour out of his head. Unfortunately, it never did.
We should say that the chap who was playing the man with the hole in his head had also been in it earlier as the woman speech master, the purple woman who was the television chef.
That's right, yes.
And was the, if you like, the comic in the piece.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
But then we get the best song, I think. Because
Yes.
There's one of the gags. She does the one about go see what the boys in the band will have, or which
the
references
band stage will have.
is it Marlene
It's
Dietrich's
Marlene.
song? Yeah,
In the bandstand, I think she says, doesn't she?
Oh, in the bandstand will have, so it's a reference to go see what the boys in the back room will have.
So there was a few jokes and references put in, and she's one of the other actresses or actors in this who actually puts in a proper, validated performance, I think.
Yeah.
But she gets a song which is very nearly good.
Absolutely.
And she sings it very nearly well. So because this is no way a criticism of her. That is the song of all the entertainments and sketches within the whole piece. It's the only one I could bear to see again. Only once, mark you.
Yeah.
And it was the Cantina Band at half speed. It was their tune again, wasn't it?
Yes, it's based on the bum 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 bum.
Yeah.
But as you say, it's half.
It was,
and it lives in
it
this.
was played by Umpa, really.
Yeah.
It was like the sort of.
Well, what was always notable about that tune was that it was a sort of throwback again to the sort of 20s, I suppose. I mean, it's basically a sort of, I don't know if you call it a Charleston.
You could Charleston to it, yes.
Yeah, but you could Charleston to it. So it's a sort of 20s
Should we
style
try?
tune. Yeah, I think we should. Why don't you try that at home, listeners?
Listeners.
The
Rather than driving that bus you're currently doing.
exactly. I forget what I was saying now. Oh yes, that's right. And this also is a attempts to enter the world of Kurt Weill. It does so. Well, it's not a particularly brilliant pastiche, but as a musical theatre song, it sort of stacks up.
It would just about hold its own. It was interesting actually because while it was on, we were trying to work out what it reminded us of, and for some of us it sounded like Kurt Weill, and some of us it sounded like Kander and Ebb, and of course they are in some senses the flip side.
Pastiche Kurt
One,
Weill.
yeah, they are the vaudeville version of Kurt Weill.
It was Ersatz.
I think the other
Ersatz Kurt
thing
Weill.
that this song does is that it does something. She's been told that the planet is under curfew. She has to get them out, and they won't leave. And she figures that if she sings them a song, they'll leave. So it's a song about saying goodbye. So it's the only. I think it's the only song that actually does something to drive. And I use this term loosely. The plot.
It's a song that does something.
Yeah. And I think it's also the one where they choose the style of music really well because she's singing to a bar. It's and it's the right kind of music for that situation.
She's being a chanteuse, isn't she?
She is. Yeah.
Good old
And it had some rhyme at the end about good night but not goodbye. So it's actually funny. It's almost like the reverse of Willkommen. It's clear and off.
Yes.
And then for those of you that are concerned about the plot,
I was very concerned.
The nice thing is that when she empties the bar, I say the nice thing, when she empties the bar and goes back, the guy with the hole in his head, there he is waiting for her. Possibly, I mean, she's locked into her. I'm worried about her, frankly.
Yeah, there was either a very romantic or a very sinister outcome to that evening.
Yeah.
You'll be dead.
Yeah.
And then we return to the plot because Chewbacca finally gets home with Han Solo for what seemed like bearing in mind everything up to that point had been tremendously languid in real time, or so it seemed. And then suddenly we had the denouement of the one remaining stormtrooper who was waiting at home, the Wookiee home, for Chewbacca to turn up, and how he was dispatched.
Over the balcony.
He was dispatched.
Sorry to give the plot away.
Yeah, that's right. So they have a little outdoor veranda, and I think Han distracts him and gets the gun away from him through Star Wars trickery, like chopping his hand or something,
Yeah.
And then he pushes him through the balsa wood veranda.
But not before revealing that he is his father.
Yeah. And Han, again, kudos to Harrison Ford, manages to seem genuinely emotional when he says how important the Wookiees are to him and they're like family.
He must have just been thinking of the money all the time.
Yeah.
We should mention the other Star Wars regulars who are about to turn up in the finale, but have brief vignettes beforehand.
Oh, does Luke turn up at the finale?
Oh, I don't know.
Now that I couldn't tell
I think
you.
he did.
Having
I think
watched
he
it,
did. Yes, I think he did. Yeah.
But there's a sequence earlier because the family waiting. We're backtracking about here, but the Wookiee family spend a lot of time worrying about Chewbacca turning up, and so they contact all their friends who happen to be the cast of Star Wars, incidentally, at various points, and we get for some reason. We get Luke Skywalker in a workshop with R2-D2 fixing a gun that seems to be damaged, I suspect, because some fool has put a stage smoke machine inside it. And we get a very tiny little sort of fight. Oh, he's got weird hair. He's obviously filming something else at the time.
He doesn't look well.
No, he looks like
doing
overpainted. He's certainly very heavy mascara.
He looks a bit like Julie Andrews.
Yeah,
yes.
He did rather.
He looked like he just stepped off a chorus line, actually, to be honest. And I don't mean the musical, I mean a musical with a chorus line.
Yes.
And that was there. And then there was an even less successful vignette with, I must say, Princess Leia and C-3PO having a bit of a bitchy squabble. And she didn't seem totally engaged.
She totally phoned it in, yeah. She just wasn't terribly interested at that moment.
No.
And then, yes, they all come back at the end, and there is a musical number. And this is perhaps the most infamous in the annals of Star Wars history, because it's a riff. As earlier, we had the riff on the Cantina theme.
As you think of it, Tim.
Exactly. Earlier you have a riff on the Cantina theme. This is a riff on the main theme. So although we haven't had the Imperial March attempted, to shame, someone will have to do that sometime.
I am here, here I am, here I am.
Something like that.
Over and over.
Yes, why not? But she does a descant. It's not actually the main tune,
That's
so she
right.
doesn't sing la 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 la.
I assume she doesn't have the range.
Well, I think they did the same thing with the Cantina thing. B. Arthur's song was.
I assume she doesn't have the range.
Well, that's probably true too.
B. Arthur might not. Yes.
But she does make a very, very brave stab, and I think it might have been a D. I'm not sure. That she has to just sort of leap up onto and gently perch on, and unfortunately, she does. Rather miss the mark, and
but it's odd to know what's going on. We think this is the
Descend
climax of
the
the
cloud of
Life Day
feathers.
celebration.
Yes,
because
it's a Life Day song, I believe.
all the Wookiees had put on a robe, and then we have this very strange science fiction effect where they walk on nothing in the stars into the middle of a sun. And the next time we see them, we meet all our friends from Star Wars again, who we've been talking to in the vignettes, plus all the extras as Wookiees, plus our Wookiee family. And then, as you say, Princess Leia appears to rub Chewbacca's groin while singing a song for 3 minutes.
It's a real moment when you wish the Death Star hadn't been blown up.
yeah, exactly.
I have a fully operational singing star.
Just to point out, you didn't get all of Alderaan. There's some still to go.
And then even that's not quite the end. I mean, we were looking at our watches, the walls, away from the television.
Yes, and again,
coda.
there's a funny moment because we get through, we survive that song, and then again, it's probably due to the copy we had and copyright reasons. You then have a moment where Chewbacca has a flashback, and it's done in complete silence, and it's like when a program of a particularly harrowing episode of a program ends and you don't have any music over the credits. It's a moment for us to just reflect on life and to think about how terrible things can be and just to absorb it all. And so I found it very cathartic, that moment. I was glad there was no sound. I wish there had also been no pictures.
That would have been better, wouldn't it? 90 minutes of black screen.
And then
sponsored by General Motors.
It was, there was an insert, wasn't there? But it was sponsored by General Motors right at the beginning. So thank you, GM. But it needed to be modified.
I think that should have been a character in the Empire.
GM.
General Motors. I find your lack of workable gearboxes disturbing.
But then we end with basically the same sense of ennui that we had at the beginning, in fact, but actually that it's just a homely environment, and now Chewbacca's home, and so they just sit there in front of little sort of table lights, don't they? Not having dinner. They sit there silently not eating their dinner.
It's a weird admixture of the Brady Bunch and just a major LSD flashback, really, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's just...
And I think if the credits hadn't rolled, you'd see Chewie going, well, I think I better be off again now.
Yes.
Bye.
Boring family.
Yeah, I never go back for another Life Day.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there was the unresolved issue about why their house wasn't raided by 40,000.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, actually, no, that was resolved.
They do attempt to resolve the fact that the stormtrooper is now very much missing, somewhat dead underneath their house.
Yes.
But the finger of suspicion is successfully diverted when they report into
Art Carney.
Into the Empire by Art Carney, who basically says he ran off for the hills and we didn't see him at all that whole day. And luckily, that's good for the Empire senior management, but I suppose they're not known to be particularly
their
competent.
leadership team. That's right.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
It's in the minutes and everything.
Well, I kind of always figured that the Empire is not particularly competent, as is pointed out in Robot Chicken that we were talking about at the beginning. It is very difficult for the most powerful force in the galaxy to prevent a bunch of teenagers from blowing up the Death Star via a 2 foot or whatever it is.
The other thing,
opening.
Incidentally, that Robot Chicken points out is that the stormtroopers are just people on salary. They're just people like you and me. And I now watch Star Wars realising that the rebels are heartless bastards, and they're killing people's fathers and husbands.
Exactly.
Just good, ordinary people.
Well, the message, if there is one from this, is that authority is good. So buck up, everyone.
But no, I'm just saying that some people you got to earn a living, and we all work for evil corporations.
Do we?
Yes. But the other thing, the other thing I wanted to say though is about sort of in the original trilogy is that music is very important because of the Cantina band, because of the Max Rebo band as well, who are Jabba's entertainers. And even the Ewoks have got some tunes. They have 2 tunes. They have Nub Yub, which is from the original version of the trilogy, and it's actually called, I think it's called Victory Song, but it's really called Nub Yub because in Ewok language, Nub Yub probably means that. But then it was changed for the remastered versions.
By bun, backwards.
By a bun, yes.
By a bun.
subliminal, isn't it? Because
Right.
But it was changed to something a bit more Peter Gabriel for the second version, a bit more new agey. And likewise in Jabba's Palace, they had a song. So you had Max Rebo and the Cy Snootles band. They're Jabba's entertainers, and you originally have something called Lapti Nek, I think is what it's called. That was from the 1983 version of Return of the Jedi. In the remastered version, you have a completely different song and more members of the band. But I did find out that they're known to be among the best jizz wailers in the galaxy. That's true. And
you're not making this up. This is a real term, isn't it?
It is.
At least it wasn't scat.
I'm also finding out... and actually, that's called. I've just realised that's called Jedi Rocks. The later version, Lapti Nek, is the original. The new song is called Jedi Rocks. Apparently, they're also responsible for a song called, and this is from Wikipedia, called "That Joyous Night I Ate My Mate." But we never get to hear that, unfortunately, or maybe we do, because there are other songs played on the sail barge, Jabba's sail barge.
But no one's paying attention to them, are they?
But
I think you'll find in the extended universe they released an entire album.
Yeah, I can believe that. And actually, that's something that I think gives Star Wars that feeling of something real or lived in. That there are entertainers as music. It sounds quite like something we might know, but with a different language and different sonics and
diegetic music.
And I think that's what made Star Wars interesting. Not the only thing, but it was something that when Star Wars came out, one thing that people commented on was it was a worn down place. The machinery wasn't new, and Mos Eisley was if you go to those classic films like Casablanca, and you've got these sort of bars where there's dodgy things going on, or obviously going back to cowboy films, any cowboy film when there's lots of dodgy characters, and there's a band as well, and actually they even stopped playing their music when
people walk in. Yes.
Panda Baba, I believe his name is, the walrus man, as he was in the Star Wars figure, has his arm cut off. They stop playing, and then once danger clears, they start playing again, which is like when you stop playing the piano when the guy walks in. So all of those things work very, very well, and I like there was a lot of humour along with the music. The prequels, which aren't canon, as I've decided, there isn't anything like that, and Empire Strikes Back, the most serious of the films, doesn't have any music as well. But I think there's a lot of playfulness in the music in Star Wars, and I think that's why it can be riffed on in things like Robot Chicken.
Well, before we finish, it's probably also worth just talking about the incidentals of Star Wars itself, of the actual original trilogy.
John Williams.
Yes, because they do have one major thing in common with musical theatre, which is that basically they are pastiches. So famously, the Imperial March is a pastiche of Prokofiev.
Everything sounds like Prokofiev to
Well,
me.
Not everything does.
You've also got Stravinsky.
I was going to say there's Stravinsky in the Sand People sequence. There's a bit that sounds for all the life of me like the opening, an early sequence of the second half of The Rite of Spring, for example. Right. I mean, really, really rather a lot. Obviously, not to the extent that anyone could sue us for saying so, but yeah, that's and it's
reminiscent.
It's basically the world that John Williams creates is an early 20th century world, either early 20th century classical, as in Prokofiev and Stravinsky, or alternatively the world of jazz and
Kurt Weill-ish.
and Kurt Weill, I suppose, in a sense, yeah. So yes,
which takes us rather
limited
nicely,
musical palette,
I think, to the one person who might combine those early 20th century worlds of classical jazz and sung jazz, and that's George Gershwin. And the irony here is that in the Muppet Show episode, the person who was going to be the guest for the episode but was rather cruelly kicked out when Luke Skywalker turns up is
Hamish McGonagall, is it?
Hamish McGonagall.
Or someone McGonagall.
Who's the Argyle gargoyle who gargles Gershwin gorgeously.
Yes,
that's right. Yeah.
And does sing, gargles Summertime.
Accompanied by Mark Hamill.
on the harmonies, yeah.
Well, there we are. Somehow we found our way through.
What a memory for us all.
Before we go, thank you both for talking about these in-canon musicals, which is the best way I can think of describing them. And we've been very down, particularly on the holiday special, but what is one thing for each of you? What's the best thing about it?
Be Arthur.
I shall be.
That's from the Star Wars fan. For me, God.
I also like the Golden Girls.
I need some thinking time.
Well, I'm going to give you my option then while you're having a think, which is actually funny enough. I think it is Be Arthur's song.
I think it's a shame that the cartoon was missing, because I'm a big fan of Boba Fett, and I would like to have seen his first ever appearance.
I think for me the most priceless moment is Carrie Fisher singing at the end, and it's just because it just seems to go a step further than Nichelle Nichols doing the Star Trek theme tune, and going all squeaky at the end. It sort of doesn't even succeed on a vocal level.
There is a wonderful Saturday Night Live with Bill Murray on Saturday Night Live where he sings to the theme Star Wars. Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars.
Right.
And I wish it had ended like that. That would have been much better.
That would have been it, and they could have all grinned cheesily, as they do indeed at the end of the Muppet Show, and some beautiful red velvet curtains could come down, and Waldorf could turn to Statler and said, "That was terrible."
As we did.
Yeah.
Well, there we are. I'm very, very grateful to you both. Thank you very much, Darren, for bringing your Star Wars expertise. Thank you, Tim, for bringing your musical theatre expertise. I'm just sorry that what we saw gave us nothing for any of us to really get our teeth into. But I do hope that on another occasion you'll join me again and we can look at some better parodies and also some sincere musicalised versions of the Star Wars films.
You just try and stop me.
Absolutely. And may the 1, 2, 3, 4s be with you.
Hey, that's very good. I thought we were going to finish with From Carrie Fisher to Can't Carry a Tune. That's the end of this episode. So anyway, thank you very much, everyone, and I'll see you all again.
Happy Life Day.
Once the injunction's been removed. Musical talk. Well, there we have it. My thanks to Darren Deeks, a Star Wars expert, as you heard there, and to Tim Sayward, of course, as always, for bringing some much-needed insight and cynicism to our interpretation of the Mark Hamill episode of The Muppet Show from February 1980 and the much-maligned, and with good reason, Star Wars Holiday Special from the 17th of November 1978. I can honestly say, and you will have picked it up from that conversation, that we all thought it was execrable, to be honest. It's regrettable the Mark Hamill episode of The Muppet Show is not a particularly good example of that show, which can be very funny, and the Star Wars Holiday Special is simply appalling. And we're not the only people who think so. It's been variously described as the worst 2 hours of television ever, and a 70s train wreck. And rather amusingly, Carrie Fisher, who plays Princess Leia, of course, has publicly stated that in exchange for doing the commentary on the Star Wars DVD, she asked George Lucas for a copy of the Star Wars Holiday Special, because it's never been commercially made available, and he agreed. And she says that she shows it at parties, generally at the end of parties when she's trying to get people to leave. And we do know what she means. The saddest thing about the Star Wars Holiday Special is that it's not even bad enough to be enjoyable, as some things are. They go through the pain barrier and you can really enjoy yourself. Unfortunately, that is not true with the Star Wars Holiday Special. It just isn't special. But as a coda to this episode of Musical Talk, I think we should look again at the actual songs that were made available in those two musicals. I'm using that in the widest possible sense. So in The Muppet Show, the songs that we were presented to that were deemed appropriate for an episode featuring the cast of Star Wars was Ramalama Ding Dong, Mark Hamill and Angus McGonagall gargling George Gershwin's Summertime, a Muppet version of the Three Little Fishies song, which was a very popular ditty in the 30s, 40s and 50s, Scooter's number called the Six String Orchestra, and finally, and in fairness, the only thing that's even faintly related to anything astral, the medley of You Are My Lucky Star and When You Wish Upon the Star, which form the finale. So, as you can see, the show wasn't really themed around anything to do with Star Wars. Certainly not in terms of what it was offering up in terms of songs. Whereas the variety sketches and songs, which featured in the Star Wars Holiday Special, are an even more mixed bag. As stated, there were at least a couple of interludes where we had circus-like events, acrobats and jugglers and people like that, generally dressed in exciting, modern, and I'm going to add the word space to the word leotard to make space leotards. There was the song that was performed to Grandpa Itchy in the Orgasmatron, which is called This Minute Now, sung by Diane Carroll. Then the Jefferson Starship appeared in a Speechmarks 3D video, that's the one with the rather unfortunate pink microphone, called Light the Sky on Fire. Then there's the song I like the best, the B. Arthur number, in the Tatooine Mos Eisley Cantina, called Good Night But Not Goodbye, which was backed by the Cantina Band, and indeed used the traditional piece of Cantina Band music which everybody can remember as a kind of underscore. And then we had the song that can only be described as Life Day Anthem, which was sung bravely, I think, by Carrie Fisher at the very end, over the Star Wars theme. And just to show that it was a variety show, it wasn't just songs. We had, as I said, those acrobats. There was the 10-minute cartoon, which has become known as The Faithful Wookiee. And there were 3 comic sketches. I say comic probably quite wrongly. All performed by Harvey Korman. The first was the 4-arm television cooking instruction scene, which we mentioned during the interview. And then there was the unfortunately not funny enough robot instruction manual, whereby Harvey Korman plays an android which has a speech defect and keeps winding down as he tries to explain how a communications device works in a video manual. And finally we have the scene in the Mos Eisley Cantina. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Variety died. And so did a little bit of my soul watching that particular piece of television. Now, it's normally at times like this in an episode when I finish off, but I must say I am fighting the urge to put in one of those little coders that you often see at the end of television programmes which have been harrowing, which say, if you've been affected by any of the issues raised in this programme, then do please phone this number for help. I'm sad to say there is no Star Wars Holiday Special helpline, so you'll just have to gird your loins, clench your teeth and grit your road, if it's frosty, until next week's episode of Musical Talk. So until then, it just falls to me to say, may the talk be with you. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk, presented by Thos Ribbits, Tim Saywood and Darren Deeks, and edited by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2015. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And you can follow me on Twitter at Musical Talk Thos.
Coda is this being.
I'm just building up to it, to be honest. Well, there we are. It was a good start, wasn't it? I'm trying to think how we can do it. Well, it won't have escaped anybody's attention that the world seems to be gearing up for what I think must be the 9th Star Wars film, official Star Wars film.
7th.
Yes.
Well, there's also Caravan of Courage and Ewoks Return to Endor.
Adventure, yeah. Meanwhile, the grandfather watches a rather erotic video of a singer attempting to seduce him.
We need to know who she is.
We do need to know who she is.
I'll look it up.
We'll have to look that up.
I did look this up before, but my mind has...
Donna... No, it's not.
It's not Donna Summer.
Donna Lee?
Sorry?
No idea.
Cleansed itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. I'm trying to get rid of it.
Frantically trying to get rid of it. We have to capture it all before it goes.
Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars.